this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Hawkbat Battalion Clone Trooper. It's part of the 30th anniversary line. If you're not too familiar with this clone, he was at the opening scene of the Tartakovsky Clone Wars series in Season 1. He probably only had a grand total of 2 seconds of screen time. But he did turn out to be a very iconic clone trooper, and pretty much anyone who has seen that series or is very familiar with it, this is probably one of the more memorable clones that came out of that series. And fortunately, Hasbro did end up making an action figure of him. And it's a really good one at that. So for the longest time, this was the second Phase 1 clone I ended up getting in my collection. I did buy him brand new back in 2008, I think it was. He was in that threshold where it was towards the end of the 30th anniversary action figures, including a coin and also including the display stand with the name. And I believe this one had one or the other of that release. Some of them had the coin, some of them had the stand. The one I got here ended up having the stand. But going back to my original point, for the longest time, between this guy and this other clone here, those were my only two representatives for Phase 1 clones in my collection for many years. I usually always had them front and center, or at least in the front row among all my clone troopers. So they've been a very important part of my collection for many years now. And they're always going to be very special to me. So for the most part, this guy is just a retool or repaint. I believe this clone mold here is just borrowed from the Evolutions pack from the Clone Trooper to Stormtrooper pack. Then he does have the extra poncho here as a new accessory. And then he does have a new paint job, which they did try to simulate him being in the mud, like we see them in that few seconds of screen time. Which it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me why clones would be wearing a poncho, because, I mean, if they're trying to keep the mud off of them or something, it just doesn't really make any sense. I can understand if they're trying to conceal themselves, or it's like they're camo in a way, but still you can see the helmet, you can see their arms, and that would end up sticking out, I imagine. But still an interesting concept. Now, there's different ways you can fold this poncho. I always kept it like this because this is pretty much how it was out of the package for me. But I do know some people drape it over the arms, kind of like that. And I have displayed it like that every now and then. He looks good either way. So you can take the poncho off. It does have a removable helmet, which I think is kind of essential to take off first. And this is, I believe, supposed to be more of the Bodhi Taylor head sculpt for the time. Lots of clones did get this particular head. He does have the red eyes as well. And it's easy enough to take this off. Hasn't really yellowed throughout the years, but this is a pretty good weathering, I think. It's mostly on the parts that are going to be exposed with the poncho on. It's a pretty good effort. There's some pretty muddy boots. Articulation is pretty good. He does have the ball joint at the head, and hinged shoulders, elbows, swivel wrists. Nothing at the waist, which I know some people would really like to have that, but for me personally, it's not the end of the world. You can still get them in some nice poses. But swivel hips, and then hinged knees and hinged ankles. There were times throughout the years I did take the poncho off and just have him run around like this. It's like a normal clone. Helmet is a pretty tight fit on him. And here's the poncho. It does have some mud weathering on it as well, as you can see. And for accessories, besides the helmet and the poncho, it does have the DC-15 rifle here, which is in a very light silver color, something kind of unique. Don't recall too many other clones having this color scheme for a rifle. It is a little flimsy though. This is towards the beginning of the new DC-15 mold. Then, as I mentioned, he's either going to have the collector coin, which he did have a designated number in the 30th anniversary line. I forget specifically what it was, but I know it was towards the very end. But if you didn't get the collector coin, you did get the stand, Clone Trooper Hawkbat Battalion. It says Attack of Clones, but this is technically an EU clone. And he never really fit well on it, because of where the hole is positioned in his foot, and he was always at an angle like that. That always kind of bothered me at the time. In fact, I kind of wanted to drill his foot out a little bit to try and make that fit better. But then I realized it might potentially go through his foot. I think on these stands here, he has fit a little bit better. I think that's pretty much all I can tell you about this clone here. Like I said, very special clone to my collection. One of the very first Phase 1 clones I ever got. He's been with me for 15, 16 years now at this point. Wouldn't mind getting more down the road. I would like to get at least one more with the collector coin, so I can put it in the coin album here. But I wouldn't mind having a whole squad of them. I think that'd be very neat. I'm surprised Hasbro hasn't made a Black Series one for him up to this point. I would think it'd be a simple one. All they have to do is just take the Phase 1 clone mold that they have and then add the poncho to it and then add some weathering. But who knows? Perhaps they'll get to it at some point. But would I recommend this clone for your collection? I definitely would. If you're a big fan of Tartakovsky Clone Wars, Clone Troopers, Army Builders, anything of that sorts, I think he's a great clone to have for your collection. I think he looks great with the poncho, even though it doesn't seem like it'd be the most practical thing for them to have. But still, it gives the clone some uniqueness. It looks good. And as I mentioned, even though they only have like 2 seconds of screen time, they're a very recognizable clone for most people. But happy it's a part of my collection. Anyways, that concludes this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for plenty more in the future. There's always more to come. If you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate your support. And check out the links in the description if you haven't done so already. As always, thanks for watching.